flannel season, y'all. As you may know, I am quite excited about Hyrule Warriors Age of Calamity, and as you also may know, it's not really because it's a Hyrule Warriors game, it's definitely not because it's a Muzu game. No, I'm excited about Hyrule Warriors Age of Calamity because it's a prequel to Breath of the Wild, which happens to be, as you know, let's all say it together, my favorite game of all time. Good job, everybody, you did it. Wow, good job. So of course, this means it fills in the gaps, whether left intentionally or unintentionally, in Breath of the Wild's lore and backstory, and also means that it'll set up potential story stuff for the sequel to Breath of the Wild. But Nintendo certainly hasn't been shy about giving us more details about this upcoming game. They've dropped several trailers like a week in a row in the Nintendo Treehouse and stuff. So needless to say, it feels like there's a bunch more information that we have yet to discover. One of the main things with Hyrule Warriors and Muzu games in general seems to be a large cast of characters. So today, I'd like to talk about every character from Breath of the Wild that I would like to see represented and ideally playable in Hyrule Warriors Age of Calamity. Let's talk about it. Starting off, we've got a bunch of playable characters that we're already aware of. So Boy Zelda and Girl Zelda, of course. The 4 champions, which are Mipha, Revali, Urbosa, and Daruk. And then Impa, Purah, and Robbie. And then, of course, we know of several non-playable characters. King Rhoam, who is Zelda's father. King Dorafan, who is Mipha's father. I had something in my mouth. There's that. Prince Sidon, who was a little youngling and is the son of King Dorafan the Zora, and a little robot guardian thing. So that guy's in there. We don't know what he does. I hope he's playable at some point. That would be real fun. And then very recently, we found out about Master Koga and some cloaked figure something or other that we don't know a lot about. There's a lot of speculation going on about that. So that's all the characters we know about so far in the game. But as we all know, there's sure to be a lot more of them. So let's get into it. And let me kind of get this out of the way first. I didn't play Hyrule Warriors, so there's probably a number of things that I'm kind of assuming about that. So I could get some things wrong. Feel free to correct me. But the other kind of key piece of information also is that this is 100 years before Breath of the Wild. So the question obviously comes up, how are there this many characters theoretically that I would want to see from Breath of the Wild in a prequel 100 years beforehand? And there's a couple different answers to that. Some of these might be characters that we know of, but didn't necessarily interact with in a physical, tangible way, so they're not still alive at that time. Others might be ones that are just also really old, or are species that have a mysterious lifespan that, for all we know, they could have been around 100 years before. And some of these, I think Nintendo probably will be fine taking the license to just say like, yeah, this is George's dad, and he looks a lot like George, so you're gonna play as George's dad because we liked George. And some of these, like this first one, I'm just gonna pull over from the NPCs list and say I'd like to play as them. So that is King Rhoam, who you might also know as the old man at the beginning of Breath of the Wild. Now, King Rhoam is Zelda's father, and we've seen him in a bunch of cutscenes so far, but we don't think he's playable, probably. But I would like him to be. I think he'd probably have a bit more of a Daruk-like play style and have some big heavy things, be a little slower, but maybe have some more defense. And I think it would be really cool actually if some of the time that he was battling, he was in his old man outfit. And since King Rhoam is Zelda's family, it would also be really cool to see some of Link's family fighting as well. Specifically, we know that Link was just an unnamed soldier way at the beginning of his, stint with the Hyrulean Guard. We also know that his father was a soldier before him. So that would be really cool to see some of the backstory of his father being a soldier and kind of interacting with that in some way. Probably it would only be a little bit at the beginning of a chapter, or maybe in like a flashback. Whether we play as his father or not, I just like to see how that story plays out, because we don't have a lot of experience of Link with family. And keeping going with the family idea, King Dorafan, we know he's in the game, of course, but it would be really neat to see him take part in the wars themselves. I know some of the war was written down on the old tablets and stuff around the Zora domain, but I don't remember if it mentioned him being in battle or not. But in some of these cases, it might be a little bit tricky differentiating between different characters of a similar race, specifically because a lot of the Zora have the same body type, so it might be hard to have two of them be super different. But this is where having Mipha, who's a very, little Zora, versus having King Dorafan, who's obviously very large. And last Zora I have on my list is Muzu. I don't think we learn much about him from within Breath of the Wild himself, but he is the aide to King Dorafan. He's the one that, remember when you go to the Zora domain, he's like, I don't know about you Hylians, y'all are crazy or something. He's definitely going to be alive and around, so if that's the kind of character that could be playable in a Hyrule Warriors game, that would be neat. I don't really care about that much of him, but I'd like to see him in any case, see what the chip on his shoulder is all about. And moving away from that side, one that honestly is like one of the main ones I'm excited about for this, and I very much think will show up, is Hestu. Hestu, as you probably remember, is the Maraca-wielding big Korok that gives you all of your weapons upgrades. Probably there is some way that they'll integrate him with the weapons system, I bet, just because that was his role in Breath of the Wild. That could be his role here as well. But he's too unique of a character and is too active, I think, to not include in the playable roster. Even if he's like DLC down the road or something, I think he needs to be included. And one of the reasons I specifically think he'll be there is because in the last treehouse, we did see Koroks integrated into the game. Now, of course, we don't totally know what they'll do within the gameplay itself, other than they're just like hard to track down and capture. But Hestu would be just an awesome playable character. I just want him in there. I don't care how you do it, just do it. And along similar legendary lines is Cass, the accordion bird. Now, I don't think that Cass himself would be in the game just because of his lifespan. I think he probably wouldn't have been alive back then, but he does talk about his teacher or master or something like that a lot. So depending on what the overlap is, I could definitely see his master showing up in the game at all, but ideally having him be playable. It'd especially be cool to see some of the songs that are taught to Cass be integrated story-wise into this game, and like how the teacher knows about them in the first place. Maybe he learned them from his teacher or something like that, but if he experienced any of it firsthand and like wrote it down in his songs to pass on to Cass, that would be super cool. Going back to the family side, we know that Urbosa was good friends with Zelda's mother, and I don't think she's going to be playable. That's not necessarily what I'm saying, but I would like to see more of how that story all played out. And we know that Zelda's mother died at some point, and it seems like from the treehouse footage that that's something that's going to be delved into here. But also narrative ties to Urbosa bring us to Riju, who is the princess or queen or something like that of the Gerudo town. And I'd like to see whoever like her mom is or something like that, who's the leader before her. Maybe it'd be her grandma. I don't know how their lifespans are either. That's another one of those that I don't know how they'd make that character that different from Urbosa, and if that matters or not. I mean, they did Fire Emblem Warriors, and probably some of those characters were pretty similar, but if there's story reasons, it would be really cool to see that predecessor be involved in the story. Similarly, there's characters in each of the tribes that I think would work out pretty well, and there's two older characters that I think would still have been alive at the time of the first game. One's from the Rito village, and that is Canelli. He's the like really old Rito guy, and he's kind of big and feathery and, old manny. And then also Bluto. He's one of the Gorons. He's old. There you go. I think he's the leader of the Goron village, if I remember right. It's been a while. And I think the next two I have are going to be really fun. But before I say those, if you wouldn't mind, subscribe to fanatixfour. That's this channel. That's where we talk about all sorts of things Nintendo every Tuesday and Thursday. That would help us out a lot. And then that way you'd also be able to get to see our videos when they come up. Let's get back to it. So the first of those two fun ones, and then I'm actually saving my favorite one for all the way last. But the first of the two fun ones is Kilton. I don't know if you remember him. He's the little guy with the like hot air balloon with the monster stuff that would come all around Breath of the Wild. He was super weird character and like really creepy and very fitting in this Halloween month of October. But I think he's going to be in the game somewhere, no matter what. Probably some kind of achievement way, because he was the one that if you killed all the Hinoxes, then you'd get, a badge, or all the Moldugas, that kind of thing. So probably he's going to be integrated in that way. But I think it would be super fun to have him playable, and that he could like dress up in the outfits that he has to be able to blend in with the monsters and then, kill him or something. I just love the idea of really quirky characters. Like you could play as Tingle in Hyrule Warriors, and that's that's just the best, you know? And the other one, also quirky, Beetle. He is the guy who, you know, sells stuff. He's been in all sorts of Zelda games. He's got his big pack, and I think it would be really fun to have attacks where he could just like chuck stuff out of his bag and hit people with it. And maybe you wouldn't even know what you're getting. But those two, I think, would be really fun and could have a lot of good random elements that I would personally quite enjoy. But the interesting thing with Age of Calamity is it takes place at a time where the Guardian tech was on the good guy's side. So it would be super cool to play as some kind of a Guardian. Probably not like the big Guardian, but maybe playing, I mean, as the little robot guy, little egg, but also playing as like the minor trial of strength guys. Playing as one of them would be real fun because I think they would still have some of the like two-handed combat that regular characters have. So it wouldn't be too different, but it would be different enough that they could have some abilities that normally you might not have. And just contextually and story-wise, it would be really cool to play as them because that's so different than how we're used to seeing Guardians as being something that we run away from. And this isn't a character specifically, but I'd love to be able to integrate some of the cool things from Breath of the Wild, like riding on the sand seals or riding on Ganondorf's horse. Because I think we saw in some of the footage that you can shield surf. So the more things they integrate from Breath of the Wild specifically into this game, the more excited I'm gonna be. And I'm really excited also to see what areas they bring back, like Castletown, obviously, and Lon Lon Ranch we saw, and some other, you know, outskirts villages and stuff. But there's places that I would love to visit, and I could make a whole nother video about this. I don't know if I will, but definitely the Forgotten Temple. I feel like that's for sure somewhere that's going to show up because there's all those Guardians there. I feel like anywhere that there's Guardians in the overworld in Breath of the Wild, there's a pretty good shot that that area is going to show up somehow in this game as well. So some other off-the-cuff fun examples would be the Zonai Ruins, the Thundra Plateau, Eventide Island, of course, and the Great Plateau and the Temple of Time. Like, I really want to see what the Temple of Time is like before all this, and like, is there going to be anything interesting happening at the Temple of Time? I don't know. It'd be cool. And the last one, I mean, you probably saw it on the thumbnail. I'm pretty sure it's going to be on the thumbnail. The Flower Lady, Magda. She is the worst and the best at the same time. So her showing up and being playable and being able to just like obliterate everything. I don't know. Like, she murders you in one hit, if I remember right. So definitely her showing up as being playable in this game, but like her grandma who taught her about flowers or something like that would be amazing. Like, you can just go around, plant a flower, an enemy steps on it, and you wipe them all out. Again, it's very silly and would be great if, even if it's just sectioned off in just one tiny bit of the game, but some kind of representation of that would be, oh man, would make me so happy. There's a lot of things I would love to see out of this game. Again, I'm so excited about what it means for filling in the gaps of Breath of the Wild, what it means for setting up story bits for Breath of the Wild sequel that's coming up, the fact that that game doesn't have to fill in the gaps, it can just run with whatever is already set up. Like, all of that is so amazing to me. So I'm very excited about this game. I hope you are too. I don't know how long this video ended up being, but I could talk about it forever. And we will actually on our podcast. We'll probably talk some more about all this weekend. So go check that out if you don't already subscribe to our podcast. And again, if you could subscribe to this channel, that would be great. But that is what I think. What do you think? What are the characters you would like to see show up in this game, whether from Breath of the Wild or not? I'm sure there's going to be other characters that show up that weren't in Breath of the Wild. Obviously, some brand new ones, some ones from other games that were like, oh, they were around 100 years ago, but they're not around now. That kind of a thing. Let me know all that more in the comment section below. And while you're down there, be sure to subscribe to fanatixfour for more videos like this every Tuesday and Thursday on YouTube about video game stuff and Nintendo stuff. And that's it for me. All right. See you next week.